Hello, everybody. This is Khatib, and it is Wednesday, June 24th, 2026. Wishing you all a beautiful Wednesday. Yes, it is hump day. Yes, I am back. I'm getting it back slowly but surely. I'm off a break. I had my writer's break for a couple of weeks, just trying to relax and get my mind together, and I am back. So we should be rolling back to our normally scheduled program little by little. Yes, I'm still working on editing my book, and I'm also working on a play and trying to manage this blog and do a little writing for the newspaper. So I'm still got my plate full, but hey, still trying to make space for weekly posts. Thinking about at least 2 a week now. That'll give me time to balance everything. So I want to thank all of you for supporting me, and I'm sitting here at my desk on this Wednesday morning. I'm like, man, life is so strange. I had an incident on yesterday where, it really baffled me. I won't get into detail, but it's just amazing how perception is, and how we can sway people to believe what we are doing is right, or we try to justify our actions. And we as friends and family and loved ones, we never really call each other out when we were wrong, out of love, not out of spite or anger or trying to belittle somebody. But it is, man, my grandmother told me, never ever turn your back on the person who was there for you when you were down. Even if you fall out, still have respect for the individual. Never put your mouth or your hands on that person out of respect of that they were there for you when nobody else was, and they came through for you. It's just a simple respect. And in today's world, we don't care. If you could do something nice for somebody, you can be there for somebody, and that doesn't mean absolutely anything to anybody in today's world. What have you done for me lately is the motto of this crazy society. So, I don't know, I got really shaken up yesterday by that, the fact that people will attack you because they believe that they are just and they're thinking, so anyway, let's get with it with this recording. Hope you like it. It's different, and hope you have a beautiful day. And I'm asking all of my listeners today, if you could, please support the blog. Make a small donation to keep it rolling. Yes, there are bills to keep this thing rolling, and I'm asking you all to support me if you could. Thank you, and have a beautiful day.
Audacity Jones, The Nerve to Stand in the Light When Everybody Else Comfortable in the Shade. Written by Khatib Shunna. Audacity Jones hated introducing himself, not all the time, just enough times for it to become annoying. Soon as people heard his name, they reacted every single time. Some laughed, some repeated it back like they thought they misheard him. Some stared for a second too long. And then came the jokes. Lord, the jokes. Baby, your mama named you Audacity. She ain't have no regular names available. With a name like that, you better be doing something important. After 40 years, Audacity had heard them all. Truth be told, the jokes didn't bother him nearly as much as they used to. What bothered him was the feeling he'd been carrying around lately. That feeling didn't have a name. At least not one he liked. Some days it felt like disappointment. Other days it felt like frustration. Most days it felt like standing in the middle of a room full of opportunities and somehow talking himself out of every one of them. That Saturday morning, he was sitting outside the corner store near Claiborne, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime during the Clinton administration. Across the street, Miss Ruby was already on her porch. Now let me tell you something about Miss Ruby. Nobody knew exactly how old she was. Nobody knew exactly when she moved into the neighborhood either. As far as most people were concerned, Miss Ruby and the porch arrived together. Matter of fact, if that woman ever moved away, half the neighborhood would have gotten lost. People used her house as directions. You know where Tyrone stay? 3 houses past Miss Ruby. You know where the fish fryer? Across from Miss Ruby. You know where the second line start? By Miss Ruby porch. The woman was basically a landmark. She sat there fanning herself with a church program, watching the street the way a queen watches her kingdom. A city bus groaned past. Somebody had old maids playing too loud. Somebody else was frying fish before 10 in the morning. Audacity didn't know who it was, but he respected the commitment. New Orleans got a different relationship with food. Some cities eat. New Orleans fellowship. Half our best memories got grease stains on them. The thought made him smile. Then the smile disappeared. Because underneath all the neighborhood noise and all the familiar comforts was the same question that had been following him around for years. What exactly was he waiting for? That question showed up a lot lately, usually at inconvenient times, while driving, while showering, while trying to sleep, while staring at one of the paintings stacked against the wall of his living room. The paintings bothered him. Not because they were bad. Actually, that was the problem. They were good. Real good. Good enough that friends had spent years telling him to show them somewhere. Good enough that strangers occasionally tried buying them when they happened to see one. Good enough that his mama used to tell him God didn't hand gifts out so people could hide them in closets. Lord, his mama. There wasn't a week that passed without him thinking about her. Sometimes grief arrived quietly. A song, a smell, a phrase, a candy bar she used to like. 1 minute you're minding your business. Next thing you know, you're standing in a grocery store staring at something on a shelf, remembering a conversation from 15 years ago. Grief funny like that. It don't always knock the door down. Sometimes it just slips into the room and sits beside you. Audacity took another sip of coffee. Mr. Leon was arguing about the Saints now. Nobody asked him to. Nobody needed him to. But there he was anyway, talking football with the confidence of a man who had never been wrong a day in his life. The problem was everybody knew Mr. Leon. That man could be wrong standing next to proof and still argue with evidence. One time somebody showed him statistics. Mr. Leon looked at the paper and said, "Them numbers lying." Audacity laughed just thinking about it. Then he heard somebody sit down beside him. He turned. An elderly woman was on the bench now. 2 grocery bags, straw hat, serious face. Audacity didn't hear her approach. She sat there looking straight ahead. Then she said, "Baby, why your face over there having an argument with itself?" Audacity blinked. "What?" The woman pointed at him. "Your face." He laughed. "My face ain't doing nothing. Your face over there fighting demons, taxes, disappointment, and probably indigestion all at the same time." That got a laugh out of him. The woman wasn't smiling, though. She kept looking at him, studying him, like she knew something. People from New Orleans know that look. Every neighborhood got at least one elder who can see through excuses quicker than glass. The woman reached into one of her grocery bags and pulled out a peach. The thing looked rough, bruised, crooked, a little tired. Honestly, it looked how most adults feel by Thursday afternoon. She handed it to him. Hold this. Audacity looked at the peach, then looked at her, then looked back at the peach. Why? Because I said so. Fair enough. He held the peach. The woman nodded. If that peach could talk, it'd spend all day apologizing for that bruise. Audacity chuckled. The woman shrugged. Wouldn't change the fact it's still a peach. The joke disappeared from his face. Something about the way she said it landed different. Like she wasn't talking about fruit anymore. Like she was talking about him. The old woman stood up, adjusted her grocery bags, then pointed at his chest. Baby, stop spending your whole life apologizing for things God already healed. Audacity stared at her. The woman started walking away, then stopped, turned around and added, and stop asking permission to become who you already are. Then she kept walking, just left him there, holding a bruised peach, staring into space. While Mr. Leon argued with all the men about the Saints' football statistics, while Miss Ruby ruled the block from her porch, while somebody's fish kept frying. And for the first time in a long time, Audacity Jones couldn't shake the feeling that life had just handed him something important, disguised as an ordinary conversation. Audacity sat there holding that peach longer than any grown man had business holding a peach. Traffic rolled by. Somebody's music got louder. Mr. Leon was still arguing about the Saints. The fish was still frying. Life was doing what life always do, moving. But his mind had stopped somewhere back at that sentence. Stop asking permission to become who you already are. Now that sounded good. Sounded deep. Sounded like something folks would put on social media with a sunset in the background. The problem was he didn't know what it actually meant. Permission from who? He wasn't waiting on a boss, wasn't waiting on friends, wasn't waiting on family. At least that's what he told himself. Then a memory showed up. The kind that sneak up on you when you ain't invited. He suddenly remembered being about 12 years old, standing in the kitchen while his mama fried fish. The radio was playing. The grease was popping. And he had one of his little drawings in his hand. Nothing special. Just something he sketched on notebook paper. He remembered showing it to her. His mama looked at it for a long time. Then she smiled. Baby, you got something. Now he remembered exactly what he said back. Nah, it ain't that good. His mama looked at him like she'd just found a roach in her potato salad. Who told you that? Nobody. Nobody had to. Somewhere along the line, he learned how to dismiss himself before anybody else got the chance. That realization sat heavy. Like one of them church dinners where you eat too much and immediately regret every decision that brought you there. The following week, he couldn't stop thinking. Not in a healthy way, neither. Audacity had a gift for overthinking. That man could take a simple decision and turn it into a congressional hearing. Should I do it? Should I wait? What if it don't work? What if people don't like it? What if people do like it? Now that one surprised him, because the more honest he got, the more he realized failure wasn't his only fear. Being seen scared him too. A few days later, he found himself walking down Dryades. Well, Oretha Castle Haley now, but if you grew up hearing old folks talk, half the city still answered to names from 30 years ago. The sun was doing what Louisiana sun do, trying to personally fight everybody outside. Audacity ducked inside the corner store for a cold drink, and there sat Baptiste. Same chair, same domino table, same expression. At this point, Audacity wasn't completely convinced the man went home. Baptiste looked up. Boy, old man, watch your mouth. You ain't even serious. I know, but it sound good. Audacity laughed. Baptiste pointed toward an empty chair. Sit down. Audacity sat. The old man studied him for a second, then another second, then another. Finally, Audacity said, "You gonna keep staring or you collecting information for the census?" Baptiste grinned. "You look tired." "I am tired, not that kind." The old man tapped the table. "You look so tired." Now see, that's the kind of sentence only old black folks say. Doctors got medical terms. Therapists got professional terms. Grandparents and elders got soul tired. And somehow everybody know exactly what it means. Audacity nodded. "Maybe." Baptiste opened a cream soda. "Maybe my foot." The old man took a drink, then leaned back. "You still painting?" Audacity sighed. "Here we go." "A little." Baptiste laughed so hard, soda almost came through his nose. "A little? What?" "A little." The old man shook his head. "Boy, that's the same lie people tell when they say they watching what they eat." Audacity laughed, because that was true too. Everybody watching what they eat. Meanwhile, the plate got enough food on it to feed a brass band. Baptiste pointed at him. "How many paintings you done finished this year?" Audacity looked away. The old man smiled. "Exactly." Silence sat between them for a minute. Not awkward silence. Thinking silence. Outside, a second line was moving somewhere in the distance. You couldn't see it from where they sat, but you could hear it. The drums, the horns, the joy. New Orleans got a sound to it. Even when you're not looking, you know it's there. Baptiste finally spoke. "You know what your problem is?" Audacity groaned. Everybody in this city apparently knew his problem. "What now?" The old man pointed his bottle toward him. "You got compassion for everybody except yourself." Audacity didn't answer. Baptiste continued. "Friend need encouragement? You there. Cousin going through something? You there. Somebody chasing a dream? You there." The old man leaned forward. "But when it come to you, suddenly you become the toughest critic in America." That hit hard, because it was true. Audacity would forgive everybody except himself. Show grace to everybody except himself. Believe in everybody except himself. The old man shook his head. "Baby, that ain't humility." "What is it?" Baptiste pointed toward his chest. "That's neglect wearing church clothes." Now that right there nearly knocked the wind out of him, because he'd spent years calling it something noble, calling it humility, calling it patience, calling it realism. Meanwhile, all he was really doing was starving parts of himself. The old man leaned back. "You know, folks always talking about self-love like it's some fancy modern idea." He waved his hand. "Self-love ain't arrogance." "It ain't?" "No," the old man snorted. "Arrogance think you better than everybody." He pointed again. "Self-love simply means agreeing with God about your value. The neighborhood noise carried on around them. Somebody laughing, somebody fussing, somebody playing music too loud, a city being itself." Baptiste stared out toward the street. "You know what else?" "What?" The old man smiled. "The older I get, the more I notice folks defend bad habits harder than they defend common sense." Audacity laughed. "That's true. I'm serious." Baptiste pointed toward the store. "You tell somebody cigarettes unhealthy. They agree. You tell somebody drinking too much unhealthy. They agree. You tell somebody eating enough salt to preserve a fishing boat unhealthy." The old man threw his hands up. Now everybody offended. Audacity nearly spit out his drink laughing. Baptiste kept going. "Folks be talking about my grandmama ate like this." The old man nodded. Yeah, and your grandmama had blood pressure too. Audacity laughed even harder. People walking by started looking over. The old man wasn't done. Sometimes growth requires enough nerve to say, baby, I know we've been doing this forever, but forever don't automatically make it right. That sat with Audacity, because it wasn't just food. It was everything. Beliefs, habits, fears, old stories people carried, old wounds people protected. Sometimes people inherited things that needed healing. Sometimes they inherited things that needed questioning. And every now and then somebody had to possess enough nerve to say, hold on, why are we still doing this? Why are we still believing this? Why am I still carrying this? The old man smiled. There you go. I didn't say nothing. You didn't have to. Baptiste stood up, your face talking again. And for the first time in years, Audacity Jones started wondering if maybe growth wasn't becoming somebody different. Maybe it was finally having enough nerve to stop hiding from who he already was. A couple weeks passed after that conversation. Life didn't suddenly turn into a movie. No choir came floating through the clouds. No angel landed on Claiborne holding a clipboard. No magical transformation happened overnight. Matter of fact, the first thing that happened was Audacity went home and almost talked himself out of everything again. That's how growth works sometimes. People think growth is one big decision. Most times it ain't. Most times it's the same decision made over and over until it finally becomes a habit. One morning you choose courage, the next morning you choose it again, the morning after that you choose it while nervous, and then one day you realize courage been sitting at your table so long, it feel like family. Audacity started painting again. Not a little. Not when he felt inspired, consistently. He turned off the television more. Spent less time arguing with himself. Spent less time waiting for perfect conditions. Because the truth was, perfect conditions never seemed to arrive. There was always a reason to wait. Always a reason to postpone. Always another excuse hiding around the corner. And excuses got a funny way of multiplying. Leave one alone too long and it start having babies. Before you know it, your whole house full of reasons not to move forward. One Saturday morning, Baptiste convinced him to bring a few paintings to a neighborhood art event over on Aretha Castle Haley. Well, convinced might not be the right word. Bullied with affection, probably closer. Audacity spent half the morning trying to back out. Baptiste spent the other half ignoring him. By noon, they were unloading paintings. The event wasn't fancy. A few tents, some local artists, a lady selling pralines, a man cooking hot sausage, another man playing trumpet like he was trying to wake up the ancestors, in other words, New Orleans. Audacity hung his paintings, then immediately regretted every decision that brought him there. He stood beside his work looking so uncomfortable, you'd think somebody forced him to wear shoes 2 sizes too small. People walked by, some looked, some nodded, some kept moving. And every time somebody stopped, his stomach tightened. That old fear started whispering, see, nobody cared. Then an older woman stopped in front of a painting of the Mississippi River. She stood there a long time, long enough that Audacity started wondering if she fell asleep standing up. Finally, she spoke. My daddy used to take me down there. Her voice softened. When I was little. The woman smiled, but I ain't thought about that in years. Her eyes watered, not from sadness, from memory. And suddenly, Audacity understood something. The painting wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to everybody who found a piece of themselves inside it. The woman ended up buying it. Then somebody else bought another. Then another. Nothing crazy, nothing life-changing, but enough. Enough to crack something open, enough to let a little light in. That evening, Audacity stopped by Calvin's store. Naturally, Baptiste was outside. At this point, everybody suspected the old man paid rent to the sidewalk. Audacity held up the money from the paintings. Baptiste looked at it, nodded once, then said, "Good." That was it. Good. Audacity stared. That's all. "What you want, fireworks?" "I sold 3 paintings. And that's all you got to say?" Baptiste shrugged. "I told you they was good." The old man opened a soda. "Now stop acting surprised every time reality agree with me." Audacity laughed, then got quiet. The sun was dropping behind the buildings. Children were riding bicycles. Miss Ruby was still on her porch. Some things in life simply permanent. The city seemed wrapped in gold. For a while, neither man said anything. Then Audacity asked a question. "You ever think people spend too much time waiting?" Baptiste laughed so hard he slapped his knee. "Boy, people wait for everything." The old man pointed down the street. "Some folks waiting for money." He pointed another direction. "Some folks waiting for confidence." Another direction. "Some folks waiting for a sign." Then he pointed toward the sky. "Whole time God probably up there talking about, baby, I already sent 3 signs. 2 opportunities and a cousin named Cheryl. What else you want?" Audacity nearly fell off the bench laughing. The old man wasn't finished. "People always waiting to feel ready." Baptiste shook his head. "Ain't nobody ready. Not completely. If folks waited until they wasn't scared, nothing would ever happen." The old man leaned back. "You think them people dancing in second lines got all their problems solved?" "No." "You think everybody smiling got life figured out?" "No." "Exactly." The old man pointed toward him. "Courage ain't the absence of fear." Then he pointed toward the paintings. "It's carrying the fear with you anyway." The evening breeze moved through the neighborhood. Music drifted somewhere in the distance. The smell of somebody's seafood boil floated down the block. Lord, New Orleans could make you hungry just walking outside. Audacity smiled, because he finally understood. The lesson was never really about paintings, never really about names, never really about art. The lesson was bigger, a whole lot bigger. Sometimes the most spiritual thing a person can do is stop arguing with their own worth. Sometimes faith looks like trusting what God already placed inside you. Sometimes growth requires enough nerve to question old habits, old fears, old assumptions, and even old versions of yourself. And sometimes self-love ain't standing in a mirror telling yourself how wonderful you are. Sometimes self-love is much quieter. Sometimes it looks like resting. Sometimes it looks like healing. Sometimes it looks like saying no. Sometimes it looks like forgiving yourself for not knowing then what you know now. And sometimes self-love is simply refusing to spend another year treating yourself like somebody God forgot to bless. The older Audacity got, the more he realized something. God never asked him to become somebody else. God never asked him to shrink. Never asked him to hide. Never asked him to apologize for every gift, every dream, every possibility living inside him. What God asked for was faith. Not faith that everything would work out perfectly. Faith enough to take the next step. Faith enough to grow. Faith enough to try. Faith enough to trust that the same God who planted the seed knew exactly what kind of tree it could become. And maybe that's the lesson. Maybe life ain't about becoming more important than other people. Maybe life ain't about proving yourself. Maybe life ain't about winning every argument or impressing every crowd. Maybe life is simply about becoming who God intended while you still got breath in your lungs. The neighborhood settled into evening. The streetlights came on. Children headed home. Miss Ruby finally went inside. A miracle had occurred. Baptiste stood up. "Well, I'm gone." Audacity smiled. "Where?" The old man started walking, then looked back. "Home." "You got a home?" Baptiste frowned. "Boy, don't start." And with that, the old man disappeared down the block, while Audacity laughed so hard he had tears in his eyes. The city hummed around him. The river kept moving. The music kept playing. Life kept unfolding, and for the first time in a very long while, Audacity Jones wasn't waiting for permission anymore. He was finally living, to be continued.